my first years of seminary formation, I took a course that changed my vision of studies forever. Now, surprisingly enough, this was a physics course that I was taking in my humanities studies when I was in Cheshire, Connecticut. Now, I'd studied physics and mathematics before when I was in the university, before joining the Legion. And there we followed the classical method of plug and chug. So, basically, you learn an equation or you learn a formula, and then you apply it over and over again. And through repetition, you start to learn how to use it, what it really means, where it applies. Now, in my physics course when I was in humanities, we did something different. I remember the first day our teacher came in, that probably many of you remember, Mr. Murphy. And he walks into the class and he says, I really don't care if you know how to apply an equation to different formulas or to different problems. But I want you to understand, where did this equation come from? How did we get here? No? Who were the thinkers that came before this person? What are the problems he was trying to solve? And I don't know, for example, the equation of Newton's universal gravitation. No? So it wasn't so much about finding how to calculate forces between two objects, but it's really understanding, where did the universal gravitational constant come from? No? Why are we using two masses? And why do you square the radius? No? Now, I can honestly say in this course, I didn't learn very much applied physics. But I did learn a very important distinction. And that's the distinction between a mere application of information and forming a problem-solving mind. And for me, this is what New Evangelization is all about. New Evangelization is a deep transformation in the mind and in the heart of the people we work with and the people we meet. Now here, the age-old saying applies just as in everything else. You can't give what you don't have. So if we want to be capable of changing people's hearts and minds, we have to have first gone through a conversion of heart and mind in ourselves. Now here in the Athenaeum, they try and help us with both of these things, but we focus above all on intellectual formation. And this core value is expressed very well in our idearium that we have here in the Athenaeum, when it says, the search for wisdom has a strong existential bent. As such, the knowledge and the experiences that we communicate should be capable of responding to man's existential and theoretical problems. This is the point. Form a problem-solving mind that can respond to men's existential and theoretical problems. Now, in our seminary, I have a fellow seminarian who gives a catechism course to young adults. And so one day, he's explaining the problem of evil and suffering. And during his explanation, he's explaining, and then all of a sudden, a girl in the back raises her hand. She's like, brother, so I kind of get this thing about suffering, but if Jesus was really God, how is it possible that he suffers? And the brother gave a great answer. He said, oh, that's a piece of cake. It's the communicatio idiomatum. But don't ask about that now. We'll get to that later. No? And so when I spoke with his brother afterwards, he said, I had no idea what the communicatio idiomatum was or how to explain it. So it's obvious that we need to form a problem-solving mind that's capable of explaining ideas like the communicatio idiomatum to ourselves and to other people. But how do we get there? How do we form this kind of mind? Now, John Henry Newman, in his book, The Development of Christian Doctrine, gives a striking image that explains this process. He says, it is indeed said that the stream is clearest near the spring. Whatever use may be made of this image, it does not apply the history of belief or philosophy, where, on the contrary, it is more full, pure, and stronger when its bed has become broad and wide. So basically he's telling us here, all this information that we receive, when we hear talks, when we go to classes, when we go to conferences, it's like these ideas that are coming out of this little spring. You know? It's a little stream that's coming out, it's clear water, we can kind of understand it, but until this forms a deep river of thought within us, we can't really expect this to change our life or our world vision or our ways of thinking about things. So, how do we, the real question comes to be, how do we turn this little spring into a roaring river of thought in our mind? And the answer is one syllable. Think. Now this sounds surprisingly simple, and it is. But if we want to turn the information we receive into this broad, full river, we need to actually think about it. So take Pope Benedict XVI, for example. In one of his book interviews, The Last Testament, Peter Seawald asks him the question, and he says, so where and how do you better reflect? And Pope Benedict responds, he says, usually at my desk. But when I need to profoundly think about something, I lay down on the couch. There you can clearly think about the question. Now, so the first time I read this, I was like, you're telling me the greatest theologian from the 20th century, when he really needed to think about a problem, he would just lay down on his couch and think about it? I don't necessarily recommend this method to all of us here, especially considering how many couches we have in our seminary. They're full very quickly. But the point is the same. If you want to turn the information you receive into this roaring river, you need to reflect, question, think, integrate, connect everything that you're learning. So we can ask ourselves, when I'm studying, when I'm looking over something, how many times do I just stop and really think about what I'm studying? No? Am I capable of finding the deep questions on reflecting on something? Or have I gone back to the old method of plug and chug? No, I'm looking for the answer and I just plug it in. Now each of us has a different way of thinking deeply about something, no? For some of us it's like before we go to bed at night we just lie down and we think about what we've had during the day. For others it's making a picture out of it. Some of us it's just highlighting with a bunch of different colors and that helps us to understand something better. Some of us are just going for a nice walk in the park with a good friend and talking things through. Now, whatever your method is, find it. And start turning all this information that we're receiving into this broad, full river. One other image that John Henry Newman uses in his book, he asked the question, which is important for all of us here because all of us are students or at least disciples of our Lord. He asked us the question, who is a true disciple of Aristotle? And he says, a true disciple of Aristotle is not someone that can tell you all of his definitions or someone who's memorized all of his sayings. But a true disciple of Aristotle is someone who thinks like Aristotle thinks. He resolves problems philosophically as Aristotle would do that. Now, this is his greatest strength, because if we think about it, when newer problems arise, this disciple can give new answers. Our world today, as we've seen in these days, is full of new existential and theoretical problems that requires new disciples that can give renewed answers. So we can ask ourselves, who am I a disciple of? Am I capable of thinking of something deeply? Don't be afraid to start thinking. Ask for a couch if you need it, but start forming a problem-solving mind.